This jig right here is set up to create your grind of your blade on a blade blank that you've either forged, cut out from scrap steel, or something that's been water jetted, something like that, like a knife blank. And I found this jig online, a guy named Gal Customs on his YouTube channel, and I've made probably 4 blades on it now, just to find out what all the ins and outs were and to see how it worked. And I could see that there's a few modifications I've made from the one I saw that he originally made. You can see there's a screw hole here that's in front of this line here, and that's because this blade is thinner than the blades that this jig was set up for. This jig was set up to cut 1.25" blades, and this blade's not 1.25" wide, so I had to go in here and put another hole in. And the pretense of this jig is very, very simple. You have a screw here that is a stop screw that keeps your file from going any further left or right, and that becomes your plunge line on your grind right there on the edge. Then you have another screw here that basically just keeps this knife blank from moving left and right, and you have a wood clamp that holds it down to this piece of wood. Then you have a row of screws going back. Adjust this camera out just a little bit for you. You have a row of screw holes that goes back to the back here with an eye bolt, and you can adjust that forward and back to get your proper angle of grind. And I've got this one set up to an 11-degree grind with just a simple square. So now this file, which is it says axe right here on the handle of the file. This is a Nicholson file, and I keep a wire brush to clean the shavings out of it right beside it, and it's just clamped to a steel bar that goes through that eye bolt, which gives you your angle and a guide, very similar to an old Lansky sharpening type system on a larger scale. And then this is just clamped to this bar, and I'll show you how to set one of these up and build one of these in a minute. But I wanted to really use one of these hard for a little while to figure out all the little ins and outs and tricks of the trade per se before I built one of these and showed you on video. Now, one thing that I did find very helpful with Gal Customs video was he takes his files and he puts like a round edge on both sides of the file with a grinder before he uses it. And the reason he does that is so that you don't get a squared off plunge line. You get kind of a rounded plunge line, which adds to the integrity of the knife, and it looks a little better to me as well. So once you get all that set up, remember that your file really only cuts in one direction like this. So all you have to do is start to grind off metal. And if you got a good sharp file, it's going to bite metal right away. And then you just remove everything down to your grind to where you're halfway down the blade, and we'll talk about that in another video, but there's ways that you can find that center point on your blade. Then you just flip the blade over to the other side and start grinding the other side of your grind line. But what I wanted to do today was show you how to make one of these. It's a very simple process to make it, and once you start using it, I think you'll find that although it's a little bit of work, if you don't have a lot of complicated tools, this is a very easy way to make good clean grind lines on a knife blank that you've made. And the cost of this thing is probably well under 10 bucks. Okay, so what we need to make this is just a couple of 1x4s here. This is what I used for stock, and these things are about 11, 10, and 14 inches long. And these are going to create your teeth. I've got 1 3/8 piece of cold rolled steel, 4 screws, some wood glue. This is a Nicholson axe file, 2 1-inch hose clamps, a roll of electrical tape, 2 stovepipe screws, and 1 eye bolt, and these are all the same size. I think they're a 3/8 by 20 if I remember right. And then you're going to need drill bits and a screw, pencil, and a square, and you're in pretty good shape. The cost of this stuff without the file is probably less than 10 bucks, or right at 10 bucks. Add the file in, you're talking about another 6 or 7 bucks for a good Nicholson axe file that you know is going to be, heavy duty cutter for metal. That's an expensive part of this process, but that file will last you a long time as long as you take care of it. Okay, so all I'm doing is lining up center line here. I'm going to throw a little bit of wood glue on this thing just to hold it down. I'm going to screw it as well. We'll line up our center lines on the boards here. Throw a couple wood screws in just to hold things in place. Then we're just going to line this board up on the front. Throw a couple of more wood screws in here. Just like that. Now, okay, now we have a line here for screw holes, and we're going to separate those about every 1 inch. And we don't need them all the way to the end of this thing. We only need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes is definitely good enough. We'll put 6 in there just for good measure. All right, and we'll come back and center punch those in a minute. Now, we also need a line here at 1 1/4 inches. We'll mark that, and we'll come in and put a line across that at 1 1/4 inches. Just like this. And then I'm going to put another row in here, another line for bolt holes at about 3/4 of an inch as well. Actually at 1 inch. I'm going to put one in there at 1 inch. So we'll have 2 sets of lines there. And the reason for that is I found that with smaller blades, like the Mora size type blades, you really need that second set of holes in there to secure that blade well without eating up the front end of your jig with the file and getting interference there. And then the same thing here, you want those holes about every inch. And then, like I said, on this one, I'm just going to put those holes in between. So I'll put them at 1 inch, halfway in between like this. I actually have a center punch laying there, so I figure I'll just use that. Okay, now I'm going to pre-drill all of these holes, and I'm going to drill them a little bit smaller than the screws that I'm putting in them to use the screw as a tap in the end. So I've got a 1/4 inch bolt here. I don't know if I said 3/8, but they're 1/4 inch bolts. All of these are 1/4 inch. These are 1/4 by 20s. And I've got a 3/16 bit, which is just a little smaller, that I'm going to use to pre-drill all of these holes. Okay, so once we have all of our holes pre-drilled, what we can then do is we can chase each one of these holes with the stove bolt, and it will essentially tap the hole for us using this screw and make it easier the next time around. So now we have to go through here and pre-tap each one of these holes by chasing it down and pulling it out. Okay, so once we've chased all of our holes, now what we want to do is we want to figure out how long we need this bar to be that we're going to attach our file to. And if we just slide it through that back bolt, give ourselves, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches of room behind the bolt back here, and then lay it on the jig or table. Take our file out and lay it about even with the jig to the front here. That tells us what length we want this thing to be. And mark it up to where the handle's at on our file, just like that. And now we can cut this bar off. Now, I take my rod and just round it off. You could do that with this file, or you could do it with a grinder. It really doesn't matter. Lay your rod up inside here. Figure out where you're going to lay on here, because that's where you're going to put your clamps. So we're going to put one clamp about right here and one clamp about right here. And we're going to use a little bit of electrical tape on here just to cushion this thing, to give that file something to bite into when we clamp it down. So we'll wrap a few wraps of tape around it just like that. Pull it off. Get that down good and snug. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to lay this on top of our file, and we can change this, but you got a coarse and a fine side on here. So if I've got 2 of these jigs, I might set one up for coarse and one up for fine, or vice versa. So this one I'm going to set up for coarse because the other one's set up for fine. And now I'm just going to slide that hose clamp up there, just like this, and screw it in place to hold that where I want it. Get it close, and then we'll get everything adjusted where we want it here. Get that screw right over top of that file, just like that. And you don't have to get crazy with it. Just make sure it's good and snug, so it can't move on you. Then you can slide your other one over the top and do the same thing. Now you're pretty much ready. So what you're going to do to set this thing up is you're going to clamp this down into something, whether it be a vise, or you could actually clamp it down to the side of a table if you wanted to, as long as you don't interfere with any movement side to side. Okay, now I don't have this clamped down in anything right now. It's just on this flat table, so I can pretty much show you how to set this thing up. What you're going to do is you're going to figure out which side of your blade you're going to grind. And this is just a blank butcher blade here from Waterjet. And what you want to do is you want to come over here and you want your plunge line, or the beginning of your blade, to be fairly close to center. So you really want it to be one of these 2 center holes here, depending on whether you're going left or right. It could be as far back as the next hole. So move that back in there, drop this screw down, and this screw is going to be left up pretty high. Because it's really just a stop that you don't want this file to go beyond here. Alright? And you're going to put that right at your plunge line. And I've marked the opposite side of the screw so that I know where that plunge line is going to be on this side. And I can raise that screw up just a little bit, just like that. And that becomes a stop now for that file. It can't go any further this way on the blade where I'm making my plunge line. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put another one in at the front of the blade, and I'm going to drive it all the way in, just like this. And I say all the way in, I mean just far enough down so that it doesn't interfere with the file, but it stops this blade from moving this direction. Okay. Alright, so once we get this thing where we want it, now remember that we're going to take this file and we're going to bevel both of these edges before we use this thing. And once we get this set up so that our plunge line's at the mark and it's back up to the screw, now we can just take a clamp and clamp the back side of this knife on the handle area, just like this. so that it can't move. So we have it held in place in the back, a positive stop here, a file stop here for our plunge line, and now we can just go along the blade this way and it will hold whatever angle we have set back here in the back. Alright guys, well I appreciate you joining me today for this video on how to make a custom jig that will grind an exact bevel line on your knife blank. I appreciate your views, I appreciate your support, I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks guys.